Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world. And so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. And I hope you're going to go and get yourself a perfect drink, because I've got a lovely story for you tonight. I also hope you're keeping yourself lovely and warm with that freezing cold weather. And don't forget to tell me whereabouts in the world you're from and what your favourite drink is, because I really do enjoy hearing from you. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, my name is Nathan and I'm a former Marine, and I would greatly appreciate remaining anonymous to protect my own credibility. You see, what I'm going to tell you seems utterly incredulous and very implausible, and I would never have believed it myself until it actually happened to me. After such a surreal experience, I realised that the fabric of my reality had been dramatically shifted and torn apart, and there was so much more going on in our earthly realm beyond what most of us could ever imagine. Few of us ever get to encounter such a strange, unexplainable phenomenon, but when we do, others may believe that we're completely crazy. And I truly understand where they're coming from, because I've been there too. How can we blame them for their limited observations? Because they only know what they have physically seen with their eyes. They are not open to a world that they have not been exposed to. Fortunately, there are people out there who believe, even though they have not seen, like many of your listeners, I imagine. And that, in my opinion, makes them people with great wisdom, insight, and intuition. After all, is it not arrogant and presumptuous of us to assume that we actually know it all, because we most certainly don't? My story starts when I went on a camping trip to the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains, which I was to find out later had a plethora of unexplained sightings of both cryptid creatures and supernatural experiences that people have encountered on the mountains there, which appear to be a hotbed of paranormal activity. It all started for me in the year 2004, when my girlfriend Pamela at the time, who is now my lovely, beautiful wife, were hiking and camping around the Jonas River Trail that goes up to Table Rock, Hawksbill Mountain and the Chimney area. I had been in these places before, so I decided to veer quite a way off the beaten track, going my own way, which I believe may have had something to do with my undoing. It was on our second night of camping that strange things started to happen during the night, things of which I had no explanation for. It had been a long, exhausting and tiring, strenuous day, uphill hiking, and we were utterly exhausted. We pitched our tents alongside this mountainous ridge in an open clearing close to a pretty little stream. It was an idyllic spot overlooking the beautiful mountainous valleys, and we were on a fairly high elevation, so the panoramic landscape was visually breathtaking. I started to prepare a fire pit, and we boiled water from the gushing stream and made tea and ate some of our rations, which on this occasion was some freeze-dried stew and rice, which tasted delicious in the open air, as everything invariably tastes infinitely much nicer out of doors. It was a beautiful fresh evening, and we watched the tangerine sun seemingly melt like white chocolate into a maze of yellow and pink folds across the sky, until finally the darkness set in, and we saw the face of a cheerful blazing white full moon smiling down upon us. We also sat back to enjoy the glorious starry night. It was warm around the fire pit, and the night was beautiful, with a chorus of crickets, croaking frogs, and owls hooting, providing us with a cheery musical entertainment. My wife and I were sitting on the ground, hugging our legs close to our chests, and marvelling at the beauty of such a gloriously pretty night. Suddenly we heard a strange, ominous sound of heavy booted feet, crunching pebbles, and walking past us, but we saw no one standing there. Instead, we noticed a thin trail of white tobacco smoke weaving past us in a willowy long line, that looked like someone was actually smoking a cigar, and we could smell its grassy, pungent aroma. We also felt as if our bodies had suddenly been enveloped in a pool of Arctic ice for a few moments, as this invisible entity had made its presence clearly known. We could feel it. It was a very physical feeling and very palpable. "What the heck was that?" asked my girlfriend in horror. "Was it a ghost of some kind?" I had no explanation to give her. It was unquestionably supernatural. I had felt the presence walk past us, heard the feet crunching the pebbles, smelt the cigar smoke, and felt a very definite cold spot. So whatever it was, I had no explanation for it at all. I immediately suggested that we retire to the warmth of our sleeping bags for an early night, and I was feeling extremely on edge. Remember, I don't suffer fools gladly. I've been in the military and experienced life and death situations on many occasions, and some of those stories are unrepeatable. They're so horrific. It takes a lot for me to get anxious because I'm a tough dude, but I have no area of expertise in dealing with things that I cannot explain, that are paranormal by nature. It was not long before my girlfriend and I had fallen into a very deep, relaxing sleep, and then we were suddenly awoken to the sound of heavy wind panelling our tent very, very violently. It was like a huge windstorm had just suddenly hit our tent, and our tent was vibrating under the pressure. Yet there was no wind there. It had to be something else. Suddenly I heard my name being called. "Nathan, it's me. Nathan, it's me. Let me in. Let me in." Whatever it was the most horrifying, ghostly voice that appeared to know my name. Pamela's face was as white as a sheet, and her whole body was shaking violently. She started to squeeze my arms tightly, and I could see that she was terribly afraid. I was clinging to my rifle tightly, which was of no use in this situation, I was sure, because whatever was calling my name, it was not of human origin, and I was certain of that. We then heard the footsteps of the heavy boots crunching the pebbles outside our tent, and we could smell the wafting odour of cigar smoke. Was this the same invisible entity we had heard but not seen just a moment ago, earlier on in the evening? Whatever this thing was, it was exceedingly menacing. The voice started up again, and it sounded like the wind as it howled my name, and the tent vibrated with the sound. "Nathan, I know you're there. Nathan, let me in, let me in." I did not answer, and whatever this thing was, it could have entered our tent, because we were only a zipper away from this invisible presence. But luckily it only asked to be invited in. And if I knew anything about the supernatural, is that you never give an entity permission, because if you invite it in, you have given it permission to tear your life apart, which is ultimately what an evil entity desires to do, so I've been told. At least I knew that much. After a while, we heard the heavy boots walking away, but the rest of the night I tossed and turned, and I was unable to get any sleep. It was all so bizarre, and I was caught up in a struggle between belief and doubt. Surely this had not actually happened. This was crazy. This was something that just didn't make sense. I was now feeling completely guilty of all those paranormal stories on television that I had dismissed at first hand as being completely bogus. It's amazing how the gold brightness of a brand new day, coupled with the radiant warmth of sunlight filtering across the valley, has the incredible effect of diffusing the dreadful memories of the previous night,
making one almost feel silly for being so afraid of something that may just have been completely harmless. Yet when the sunlight did finally retreat at the end of the day, like a good friend with a cheerful disposition, and night finally arrived, like a dark intruder who had an ugly motive, I suddenly felt all vulnerable and insecure again. Was I going to have a visitation from this ghostly entity all over again? I sincerely hoped not. As Pamela and I sat eating by the fire, all our dinner and drinking our tea, neither of us said a word. We were silent for a long time. I could tell by the telltale dark rims around my girlfriend's glacier blue eyes that the previous night she had not slept a single wink. I could see the tightness of her shoulders and the awkwardness of her posture, and I could sense that she was also worried about what the night might have in store for us. It seemed so eerily quiet in the valley where we had pitched our tent this evening, and there was no musical entertainment, as the crickets and the frogs appeared to have turned in early for the night. Instead, we were greeted with an airy silence that was both menacing and disabling. "Do you think it'll be back tonight?" asked my girlfriend, looking at me with horror in her eyes. I just couldn't bear it if it came back. That thing, whatever it was, Nathan, it terrified the life out of me. I don't think I could take it if I heard that voice again. It was the creepiest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And what gets me going more than anything else is, how on earth did it know your name? And what on earth was it? It was hard to reassure my girlfriend, as you can imagine. It would have been different if we were dealing with something like a cougar or a bear, but this was a whole new ballgame. I mean, how do you deal with something that you cannot see? You are powerless in such a situation. Once again, we were awakened during the night, and this time we found ourselves experiencing stones being flung at our tent, and we heard the sounds of very audible growls, and they were menacing and quite frightening. The thing had come back, I thought, and it had elevated its menacing, haunting attacks on us to a whole new level. Truly, I did not know what to do, so I decided to confront it, but Pamela was begging me not to. "Please don't," she begged. "Stay here in the tent with me. I'm sure it will go away. I mean, we're dealing with something paranormal. I don't think we should confront it." I listened to her, and I'm glad I did, because the thing, whatever it was, retreated. But then, unfortunately, it came back, about 3 hours later, pounding on our tent with even more determination, and it threw stones at our tent, and it growled at us like a roaring lion that was extremely intimidating. "I'm sure it's a demon," said Pamela. "I've heard that they rarely growl." The growl did sound supernatural, but I couldn't just sit back and take this a moment longer. So, armed with my rifle, I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Get out! Get out! Go away! You are not welcome here! Do you hear what I say? Get out!" I then prized myself out of my tent, wearing my pajamas and a flashlight on my head for better vision, and clutching my rifle. It was then that I saw the creature. In that moment, I truly thought it was a demon. But this thing was as real as you and I are. It had a pulse. It had a heartbeat. And the most pungent odour that I have ever smelt before, and ever hope to smell again. It was like a skunk in its ferocity. The creature was covered in thick, short black hair that was so black it was almost blue. It was as dark as the darkest raven, but it had a small bib of pure white fur just on its chest. It had bright red demonic eyes and a very, very ape-like face with human influences. Its body was both hefty, big and muscular, and it was about 8 feet tall and approximately 700 pounds, and its girth was 4 to 5 feet in width. The arms were long like that of an ape, but bigger and more muscular, and the torso, although invisible due to the hair covering, was exceedingly ripped. This creature would make some of the fittest Marines I know look like lightweights compared to him. The long, almost angular, hairless face was grey in colour, and the head was bullet-shaped and appeared to blend seamlessly into the shoulders without much evidence of a neck. So if the creature turned one way, so did the shoulders with the head. I truly felt that I was staring in the face of a malevolent demon. This creature was seething with utter rage, but his behaviour towards me was instinctively territorial. He was furious that I was on his turf, and he was making that very, very clear. On this night I had camped off the beaten track, away from the hiker's trail, and one pretty spot of natural wilderness that the creature clearly considered to be his. The creature was pounding his chest in a show of dominance and defiance, and he was incensed with rage, and he was using his enormous feet to smack the tent, making it clearly apparent that he wanted us gone as soon as we possibly could go. He was lunging towards me like a fighter in a boxing ring, attempting to make his first punch, and I knew that this was not a fight that I was going to win. Next to this creature, I was like a willowy kid attempting to take down Mike Tyson. I've always felt strong and capable, but next to this thing I felt pathetic, uncoordinated, and completely clumsy. I immediately fired some warning shots into the air, and to my surprise the creature just called my bluff and stood there, shaking his fists at me defiantly and growling furiously, showing a very large set of human-like teeth that looked like luminescent white daggers against his dark form. I proceeded to fire a few more rounds, and the creature did not move, until I aimed the rifle directly at his heart, and then he knew that he was in danger. He thundered away as fast as he could, literally galloping into the undergrowth, and then he vanished from my sight. My heart was thumping violently in my chest like a heavy, heavy drum, and I was breathing rapidly, and I was sweating like a pig, and I have never been inclined to sweating before. Even my hands were clammy with moisture, and water was pouring down my thighs, and my back was soaking. My clothes were utterly drenched. I was so rattled by my experience that I made sure I calmed down before my girlfriend actually saw how terrified I was. How could I protect her if I came across as unable to control my own paralysing fear? My training as a Marine has been of some help because I had learnt how to shoot under extreme stressful situations, and this was the most testing one of my entire life. What was this? Asked my girlfriend as I entered the tent. I lied to her and told her that it was the invisible man that had been growling at us. It seemed preferable than telling her that I had encountered an apex predator that could have killed us both in a heartbeat. Why would you fire at a ghost? She asked me. You cannot kill something that is already dead, can you? I was hoping the noise would scare him away, I said. My girlfriend was shaking, and tears were rolling down her cheeks. Please don't react like that again. It really sounded like you were fighting a wild animal. It was so terrifying inside the tent. I thought that whatever it was going to kill you, and that I would be next. How could I ever tell her how close to the truth her perceptions really were? The next day I told my girlfriend that we were going to go home, and the look on her face was one of immediate relief. I think it's a good idea, she said. I don't think that this ghostly spectre is going to leave us alone. And the way things transpired last night, they're only going to get worse. We looked around the campsite and we saw stones littering the area around our tent. These had been flung at us during the night by that apex predator. I also came across a muddy footprint that measured 17 inches, just several yards from the tent. As we walked away from our tent, both Pamela and I felt that eyes were on us, and that something was following or stalking us. I personally believe it was the creature, ensuring that we moved away from his territory, and he couldn't wait to see the back of us. I tried to see things from his perspective by imagining what it would be like if he moved onto my own property and invaded our lives. I would not like it at all, so I do understand his animosity towards us, but it was a very frightening, harrowing ordeal, let's not kid. It was only about 5 years after my experience that I was to discover that I had encountered a Bigfoot creature. But I had never told my wife the story, and even though I have longed to, but I think it's so much better that some things are left unsaid. It took her a long time to get over our ghostly experience, so I hardly wanted to add fuel to the fire and add an ape-like humanoid to the equation. On the subject of ghosts, I bumped into a friend of mine who was camping around the same trail, and he told me that he and his wife saw a full-body apparition of a man in very heavy boots walking up the trail that disappeared in front of his eyes. He said when the man turned around and looked at him, there were large, black, vacant, empty sockets staring back at him, and he said they filled him with dread and terror. He woke up in the middle of the night and was convinced that someone was actually calling his name, and his wife heard it too. But there was no way on God's earth they were going to leave their tents to investigate the cause, and who can blame them, because I did exactly the same. I hope my story was of interest. Well, that was an exceptionally lovely story, Nathan, and I have to tell you, these supernatural encounters that happen in areas of the Appalachian Mountains are incredibly common. You're not the first. There are lots of people who have had sightings of paranormal encounters, have seen orbs, have seen strange discs, have seen all kinds of weird things in forests. There is so much that we don't understand that is going on there. And I have to tell you, I do think that you encountered a Bigfoot that didn't want you on his territory. So maybe there's something to be said to keeping to the trail. Until next time, goodbye and good night.